Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cronin Challenge to Change. I'm so excited to have with us today from our own Flint, Michigan, Sheriff Chris Swanson. He has single-handedly turned Flint, Michigan and its reputation around. Not too long ago, we were dealing with the Flint water crisis, and that received such global bad press. And now I'm so happy to say that he and his whole department have turned around the reputation of our tiny town. Well, not really tiny, but of our Midwestern town of Flint and Genesee County. And, I just want to talk a little bit about where we've come. It was just a couple hundred years ago that our own President Abraham Lincoln, he worked so hard and so tirelessly, and in fact, lost his life to move along the betterment of all Americans, and including the race relations and African Americans and Black people. And I ask each of you, are we that much better off now? I mean, was all of that sacrifice, all of those hundreds of years ago, what was it all for? And if it's not for people like our own Sheriff Swanson, I believe that we would be no better off. We need to continue to pull ourselves up from our own bootstraps and just walk the walk as Sheriff Chris Swanson has done. And without further ado, I'm going to join him in our Facebook Live, and I'm happy and eager to take any and all questions. Welcome and good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Those are beyond kind words. I mean, my goodness, I appreciate it, but there's a lot more that made that happen than just me that night. So I'm sure we'll get into that. Man, you're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, I know you have you're a motivational speaker. You have your own Swanson Leadership Company. Did that come before your days of being a sheriff?
I like to think of it more of an inspirational speaker where,
okay.
Because I've been a medic since I was 20 years old, and when you breathe for somebody, you restore life, and that's really what inspiration means. You breathe life into people, and that's been my whole life. I've always been that kid that always can go into a crowd and mix it up, and everybody's happy, and I can relate to anybody from addicts to cops to business owners to labor to young to old. That's just who I am. But I've been in police work since I was 18 years old. My dad was Detroit police officer during the riots. He got out after 7 years. My grandpa did 32 years in DPD. So I've always had it in my blood. And then I got hired full time when I was 20, and I've been with the sheriff's office ever since, which has literally allowed me to do everything cool in my life.
That's amazing. And I have to believe that as the motivational speaker, as the inspirational speaker that you are, the leader that you are, not only in your role as a sheriff of the, sheriff of the entire Genesee County area, but that day,
yes,
when you were inspired to throw down your weapons, that had to have come from just the leader within you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, leadership is a evolving concept. Nobody should ever say, I'm an expert leader. We're all students of leadership, and I've always spoken of that message, and I've always loved the leadership role. I've loved military leaders and sports leaders and political leaders, and just watching people to just grab something that's a mess and make something out of it. And so I have always had that personality. I've always had a personality of bringing calm to situation. I've always been an outgoing personality. I used to get in trouble in school all the time for talking too much. They would put the quietest person next to me, Colleen Vogan, and within a day, we're both getting in trouble. I just love talking and getting communication going and talking to people that don't look like me and act like me. So to your point, all those micro decisions that have been made throughout my life and all those things I experienced, I will tell you, in my 27 years, that day was the day that it all came to pay off. That was the day that was my greatest police moment. That was the greatest police operation. Everything was great about that day. And then what's happened since then, it's just been a huge blessing. So it all came to a head right then and there. Looking at all those decisions, this is the reason why I did that.
Well, and they say, with all of that opportune time, you have to be ready for it.
Yes.
You know, and all the years of training and all the years of the leadership training and just your being in your role all those years. I mean, you were under sheriff during the Flint water crisis.
Correct.
So that had to have helped as well, right? I mean, that garnered a lot of strength within. And so in that moment, when you saw a potential, violent protest, what were you thinking? What did you do?
Well, the whole day, it was just kind of a controlled calm. You know, we'd all seen across the nation what had happened during the week. And then the Friday night before, they burned a sheriff's office in Oregon. They torched CNN. They burned precincts in Minneapolis. And so we had known about this protest as these new events were coming, and we planned accordingly. Nobody knew they would be going to our local police department in Flint Township, which is within the county. It's in the business district of the city of Flint. And when they turned about 2.5 hours after the protest started towards the police department, the whole thing changed, the whole temperature. Nobody planned on it. Nobody expected it. And I will tell you, anybody who's watching now in any profession, you do your best work when it comes from an instinct. You can have all the experience and all the training, but it really is your gut instinct that leads many people to success. And I would love to say that it was a plan. I would love to say that this is what we were going to do. But myself and the undersheriff that's now with me were walking up, and we had our gear on. I had my helmet on. I literally was just like, how did this happen? Like, how are we going to be a statistic that I've seen all night? And it was mind blowing because we had just come through this COVID-19, and we got a jail here with one of the most violent places in the country. And we have 0 inmates with COVID cases. Considering a county that has such a high level of COVID cases, we had so much success. Cops were the frontline heroes. And in 8 minutes, 46 seconds, it was gone. Now we're the villains. And so I had so much anxiety. I was probably a little angry, like, this is crazy. But with all my gear, and I make this correlation for your viewers, with all my gear, having a front line, having experienced officers there, we had the same thing everybody else did. We had our gas and our rubber bullets and our pepper guns and all that. There was more anxiety then than there was when I just said, that's it. Take the helmet off. I saw a fist bump over here. I saw a hug. I saw my buddy who's Jeff Hawkins in the crowd. I said, I'm coming in. And literally when I went in the crowd, I was at total peace. There was no plan. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm not trying to be correct. It literally was instinctively the right thing to do. And it paid out to be the best decision.
Well, instinctively, it brought out the best in you.
Yes.
And we've seen time and time again with all walks of life, whether it's all professions, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a medical doctor,
yes,
whether it's a lawyer, when their backs are pushed against the wall, the worst, their true character comes out.
That's right.
So with law enforcement, I know one bad seed can spoil the whole bunch. So how do we take those bad seeds out instead of, obviously there's the whole talk, and we'll get into it later about the defunding, but instead of that, isn't there a better way to be able to scrutinize law enforcement better, or train them better, or perhaps get rid of that bad seed? I know the unions are pretty strong when it comes to defending their law enforcement. What do you speak to that? How can you speak to that?
Well, I've been all over the state and around the nation speaking on leadership and ethics and police training. I've been done that for, over 10, 15 years. So this is my wheelhouse. I have no problem calling people out for accountability because I do it to myself. And so when it comes to law enforcement, George Floyd changed American policing forever, because now we are all nationwide focused on, we've got to do things different. We've got to do policing different. And what does that look like? Number one, we have a field that is expected that when a 1-year rookie shows up and a 30-year veteran, that they perform at expert level, no matter what the circumstance is. Otherwise, they have dropped the ball, so to speak. Well, how do we get these people that have 30 years on the same experience and training that the 1 year has on? And it starts with that model of training. Right now, I'm a licensed medic, okay? I've been a medic since I was 20. I keep my license up because of continuing education credits. Social workers have to do that. Physicians have to do that. But in police work, There are no continuing education. There's nothing after I get out of the academy that says, now, once you're done with the basic police academy, you need to do this, this, and this every year. You need to do this, 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 and this. I mean, for firearms, we do that. But I'm talking about diversity. I'm talking about social justice. I'm talking about de-escalation. I'm talking about service-oriented things. And when you get that down as a mandatory, you're going to see, number one, professionalism of policing show up. Number two is we have to remember the model of protect and serve. So you bring up some of the things I've done in my past. I didn't know in 2013 when I took my first mission trip to a foreign country in Haiti, which I've been to over 6 times, that those mission moments would teach me that service to people that can give nothing back is a great teacher for when the moments come, like you saw on May 30th.
Sure.
It's all those little decisions to serve people when no one's looking. That's leadership. Don't do it to post it. Don't do it to get a crowd there. Serve people that can do nothing for you. And that breaks your barriers down. Here's the third thing is there's no record of aggressive and assaultive behavior for law enforcement. I can think of people right now in my career that had no business being in police work and were in it 20 years too long. Mm-hmm. These are the kinds of people that when I see situations like that, I said, that's this person. But if they decide to get disciplined here and then go to Butte, Montana, there's no database that shows that they have a history of either racial slurs or aggressive behavior or assaultive charges. They can go out there and start fresh. Listen, I can get a 2006 Ford Explorer and find out every oil change it's had through a Carfax. Why can't we do that on police work? I teach at UM. They can go up and see my reviews. They can see where I'm good, where I'm bad. These are the small steps that are going to bring policing back to where it needs to be.
You know, there's he's retired now, but he served in Camden, New Jersey, Scott Thompson.
Okay.
Sheriff Scott Thompson, and he turned around the whole police department during those years. Mm-hmm. And instead of a defunding, they did like a reorganization. Yes. And he has been quoted as saying that the more police need training with, you know, dealing with people with mental illness, you know, psychological issues. He would have rather seen 10 boys and girls clubs than, you know, having 10 more law enforcement officers. You know, and the statistics during that 2013 to 2017 time period, the murder rate went down, the solve rate went down, and the solve rate is all about having that communication among the community.
Yes.
And I think what you did on that epic day during that, what could have potentially been a violent protest, but instead you made it into a parade. You were among the community.
Yes.
And the people of any community, I think they need to learn to, they need to learn to trust the police, but that trust has to be earned.
Yes.
So, you know, how can you speak to developing more, you know, better relationships across the country between law enforcement and their communities?
Well, first of all, the burden falls on the police. You know, that would never have happened had I not took the first step into the crowd and said, tell me what you need. Law enforcement, and I can say this because I am one, we are many times our own worst enemies. We don't want to let our guard down. We don't want to communicate. We don't want to talk to the media. We want to keep it all cop talk. We want to keep our nomenclature all protected. People are tired of that. They really are. They want police to be human. They want to see the moms, the dads, the sons, the daughters who have a great responsibility, but not create a barrier. You talk about boys and girls clubs. There's a balance. Right now, as we're chatting, people are calling 911 because they are scared to death, whether somebody just shot, somebody just stabbed, somebody's breaking in their house. There are crimes that we're not going to eliminate. Let's be honest with that. But it's how you respond on the service side. Now, I can teach people tactics and how to respond on the protection side, but the service side is really what the community needs to build those inroads. And what does that look like? I'll give you a perfect example. When we got hit with the COVID crisis here in Genesee County, we, at the third month part, we're the 4th highest in the state for deaths and the 5th highest in cases out of 83 counties, right? But we have a inner city that when this first started, their food supply was eliminated because the food delivery service, they didn't show up to work. They had COVID cases. You had people that didn't get water. They've been getting water since 2015. You have elderly that have been getting insured that didn't get their insured. You have a high poverty population. So what happens? On March 17th, I brought 40 faith-based leaders in. I deputized them as deputy sheriffs. We created 9 hubs around the county to deliver food. From March 17th till May 1st, we delivered 1 million pounds of food to this community. And guess who helped deliver it? Cops, clergy, sitting right next to them, Catholics serving next to Muslims, and cops serving next to whites and blacks. And because when you take care of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basic bottom, people can relate to that. And when you serve at the basic level, those things pay off. Because I'll tell you, in that crowd, they were street savvy. They were not people that were going to listen to just empty words. They wanted to see this. And when I walked in there, because we also have the jail and we're very comfortable. I grew up in a mixed neighborhood and I preach at black churches. So I'm very comfortable in the urban environment. They read that before I said a word. Mm-hmm. They saw the heart like, no, seriously, what do you need me to do? I will do it. And when they said the famous words, walk with us, my gears are turning. Instinctively, let's walk.
Well, you did what was human. You showed kindness above more acrimony, and that they don't, people at their, most vulnerable need someone to walk the walk with them.
Yes.
And that's the community spirit, and that's just being human. And, I know there's a lot of controversy about George Floyd and the life he lived, and,
doesn't mean a thing.
The controversial life, right? But that's not the issue. The issue is how he died.
That's right.
And he is now a symbol of not doing that anymore. Like I talked about earlier, all those people in the past, from Abraham Lincoln to, Martin Luther King, and just so all that was for naught, and then now we have you, and we need to make change, right? And we need to, all these little efforts along the way, they have to, we don't want him to have died in vain.
And
right?
I'm telling you, he didn't. That's why I say he changed American policing forever. And when you mention Dr. King and Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson for civil rights, think about this in history. Our greatest moments in history is when this country unified.
Right.
Our darkest days is when we were divided. And we are in a season now where there's a lot of both. And people are starving for some bright light to say, we can unify, even if we don't look like each other, believe like each other, think like each other. And that is what I have been so enthused about, is that moment allowed people to talk that they've never talked to before. Since that day, I want you to know, I've talked to Black Lives Matter's presidents and council people and officers every day. I've marched with white people protesting for Black Lives Matter, because it's not just one group who's impacted. Everybody wants unity. Everybody deserves dignity. Everybody deserves respect. Everybody deserves to be treated like a human being. And we have made great strides. It's a check in our history that we're going to look back. And it is a moment in time where we will be united more than ever before. And I will tell you this, until my dying days, I will do everything I can to be a part of that. And because I'm a sheriff and because I've been given a platform, it is an honor to be that voice out there to say, hey, don't look at all these distractions. Stay focused on unity. Stay focused on, they're not like me. Well, then go over there and introduce yourself. Find out what the Nation of Islam believes. Find out what somebody from the inner city goes through. Find out what a white suburbanite mother looks like. I mean, let's have these conversations, because when you're unclear, you're unkind. And I see that, and I'm enthused that we have a great day ahead.
I love that you said that. When you're unclear, you're unkind. That's a perfect segue into knowledge is power, right? And so many people are so worried about getting their point across that they don't listen to the other side, and to maybe be a little more sensitive to that person walking in those shoes. And that's the first thing about building the gap and bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community is being one. And so, there's so much talk now about defunding the police officers and the law enforcement agencies. We've seen it in Minneapolis, and LA and Chicago are not far behind, or New York rather. LA and New York are not far behind. What can you speak to that? And do you agree with that?
All right, this is going to blow your mind, okay? Absolutely defund ineffective police leadership and police departments that have lost faith with their community. They cannot exist. Let me add to the second part of that. The sheriff's office here in Genesee County, we have 9 police contracts. So we have police contracts with areas that used to have their own policing, but have now contracted with the sheriff's office, and now we are their police department. So I'm only going to speak for what Chris Swanson does. They are exactly what I have in my head and my heart. The officers that we send out, they mirror what's from the top. So if you have a police department that's ineffective, that the public has lost faith in, get them out and get a police agency in there that they can restore their faith, that has leadership that people respect. That's the difference. You cannot defund law and order. It's impossible. You can't defund law enforcement. There are people that are still going to be victimized, and the police will come and rescue from fires. They will pull you from cars, and they will save you from violent people. They will take and solve domestic issues. They will rescue children. They'll go to active shooter situations and risk their lives. Those things are still going to happen. But what's happened is you have a model that people have lost faith in. So remove the model and put one in that works. But that model has to include epic, top-notch, professional police leadership. It starts from the top.
Well, and training, right? Like you were saying earlier, you know, some of these young officers going out, you know, with these, you know, really tragic instances,
Yes.
you know, they're expected to perform right then and there, and they don't have the training.
Zero. And I'm going to tell you, experience is the best trainer, both good and bad. Like I learned more in the storm than I did in the sun. And so when you are involved in the most, and I'm going to say this without going into any specifics, for you and your listeners, your viewers, think about the time in your life that you were at the lowest of lows. When you got out of that, you learned lessons that you'll never forget, and you appreciate times you took for granted. We learned that in the COVID cases. So when it comes to police training, the whole mindset of training has to be different, because I don't ever want to go back to another George Floyd. I don't ever want to go back to another situation where I see a fleeing African-American get shot in the back. And those should be the lessons that we learn to say never again. But I'm telling you, the training and the experience that people get now, it's going to be turned into something that we've never seen before. And you see that across the country right now. I think a lot of the don't fund movement is could be reactionary, could be emotional, but when dust settles, we are going to be a better police model than we were the day before George Floyd met Minneapolis PD.
Well, you know, I have a couple questions from our viewers.
Let's go.
All right. One is many celebrities are paying money, you know, for bond money, who were put in jail for the protesting. And many of those were violent protesters. How do you feel about that?
I mean, number one, I have no facts to back it up. Number two, I got friends that are knuckleheads, and I'm going to be their friend no matter what. So if my buddy screws up 6 times and he does something stupid, I may be very well that guy to say, listen, man, I'm going to hook you up. I don't know. I don't know the reason behind it, the motive behind it. That's a great question. But I will tell you that obviously they're trying to make a statement. And so whatever their motive is, I just hope it's pure.
Yeah. I have another question. What can you tell minorities to help them to trust law enforcement?
Yeah. Dude, that's an awesome question. So yesterday, I'm going to give you a little fun fact here. Yesterday, Dwan Robinson, the president of Black Lives Matter Flint, I called him up, okay? And I said, hey, man, I want to meet with you. So he brings one of his associates. Her name is Sam. They come in the office. They meet with me and the undersheriff. My sister had made some molasses cookies, and she brought them yesterday. And so what's that?
I love those.
Yes, you would love hers too. So we sit down, and I was just at a party store talking to one of my buddies who's Muslim, and my buddy gave a cashier's check, and he goes, hey, give this to a cause that you think is worthwhile. All that to say, Dwan Robinson, myself, the undersheriff, and Sam sat down for an hour, and we just talked. And we ate my sister's cookies. And I say, hey, this guy gave a $300 cashier's check. I want you to use it for what you have going on. And I want you to see me taking the first step. I want you to go to your folks, your circle of influence, to say, listen, They're taking steps every day. They're taking action. It's almost like when you make up with a spouse or you make up with a friend, you can say what you're going to do, but actions speak and words whisper. That's how we build relationships, to say, listen, I am bone white and you are African-American. But although we didn't see eye to eye perhaps yesterday, if we agree that today's a new day, then we can't go back to yesterday. Otherwise, we're going to go back to where it always was. So we sat there for an hour. And when we got done, it was a cordial, it was an event. It was another step in the right direction. There's no days off in this journey. There's no holidays. This is the new beginning of what happens in our race relations. And when you prove that by your actions, by just doing simple acts of kindness, people will begin to trust more. Now, I know his heart, and I just met him a week ago, that my intentions, I talked about intentions, my intentions are pure. But I can't make him believe that. I have to show him. I have to build confidence. And that's what we're doing. And it starts with one person at a time.
I agree. So I have some more questions, if that's okay with you, Sheriff.
Go.
What recommendations for the Flint area youth do you think can be implemented for their benefit? So to make children even less afraid of the police, because now, you know, their parents, and with good justification, are saying you can't trust the police.
Yeah. Okay, you're all up in my head right now. Number one, it starts with, we have school resource officers that are all mixed races that go into the schools and talk and break that barrier down. Number two, you have to do the same thing with the parents, which we just talked about, that police reform, how you treat people, diversity, and social justice. Number three is you have to allow law enforcement to be a desired field, a noble field. So we have already been in the works and are actually announcing it tomorrow. The Sheriff's Office has partnered with University of Michigan Flint and Mott Community College, and we have created an Explorer program called Flint Explorers, where we take students from middle school to high school and we expose them to law enforcement. And it's a mixed crowd. We have 3 African Americans that are leading it. We have a white guy that's leading it. And now they're in the field and they're getting exposed to, hey, they do some really cool stuff. Now they're going to tell 10 people, and those people will say, hey, wait a second, there's a different approach. All those things with the youth, look at what happened in one-on-one interaction in Minneapolis, lit this whole country on fire. So one positive interaction, don't tell me it can't be done, because we just saw what happened when one-on-one happened. It's those small little steps where moms and dads can hear back from their kids and say, hey, I'm in the Explorer program at Flint Explorers, and I just talked to a lieutenant who's black or a sergeant who's a white female, and she was really cool. Now it gives the parents some leverage to say, well, good. Now maybe there's more of them. Just keep your eyes open, and it breaks it down. It's got to happen at micro decisions.
Well, and it will happen. It just takes a lot more effort, because we all know that bad news spreads way more than good news, right? So we have to take 10 good acts of kindness, counteract one negative.
And just stay the course.
Yeah, stay the course and it's that sustainability, it's that persistence.
Yes.
So have you been approached by other law enforcement agencies to, teach them, to lead them, to train them? How can other law enforcement agencies follow Genesee County's footsteps?
Well, first, I mentioned before, I've been in police training for 15 years, and I teach ethics and leadership and policing with purpose. So I've taught thousands and thousands and thousands of cops all over the country. But right now, because it's so fresh, I have been reached out to small police departments, retirees, large agencies, thanking. I was with my state police friends, and especially the people on the line. Probably the best feedback I got was a text message from parents of one of the officers that was on the line. And they said that our son is tough as nails, but was scared to death that night. And when the crowd turned, our whole family just melted in thanks. When I get those kinds of comments, listen, again, cops don't like to share glory with, with themselves. And the protesters get, credit. The other cops there get credit. I just happen to be in that spot. But when you get validated by what you did was the right thing, that's righteous. So it's too soon to say, hey, Chris, can you come down and teach us? Because there's a lot of good moves that are already happening with police professionals that are in there. And I think that's going to continue. But I also think, based on the fact that I've talked all over the world, you're in the last week, I've done over 80 interviews all over the world, from Australia to Israel to Russia. I've talked to France, to Canada, because I notice it's an international need. We've got to change how authority in a community is received and how it's given. So I've had some incredible comments. In fact, last story on this one, I got a card from the son of the sheriff, 3 sheriffs before me.
Wow.
And the son said, my dad would be proud. He was the Sheriff Tom Bell, and this was Tom Bell Jr. That's the kind of stuff that just melts my heart, and I get all fired up. I wish I could go back out there and recreate it.
Well, in fact, you were just out last weekend, right? On another.
I'm out every night. Every
night.
Oh, let me just say that. 9 days, thousands of protesters, not one arrest, not one fire, not one injury.
Wow. That's
Flint,
some amazing statistics. Yeah, that's kudos to you and your department. That's amazing.
Well, for the Flint community, it's a victory for them. It's a victory. I mean, I appreciate the accolades, but honestly, I couldn't have done what I did without them. And now there's Flint pride. Like, we are not letting our city go backwards. We are the beacon of light, which is awesome.
Well, yeah. I mean, look what just happened in Chicago. How do you feel about that?
Do tell. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Just how some of the violent protests, have been damaging so many cities, and it's just a travesty. And now, and like I was talking to before, we're getting more questions on the first question about the celebrities, paying money to get some of these violent protesters out, and also monies for defunding and disbanding the police. And how do you feel about these celebrities coming in, paying all this money, and they don't even live in those affected areas?
Well, let me make first a big difference between peaceful protesters that have the right mission and people that are just caused to create crime and damage in somebody else's neighborhood. Like, don't come into my house and disrespect my house. Swanson doesn't approve of any of that, nor will I. In fact, the law enforcement side of us, that's the protection side. The service side are people that have righteous anger. The service side of what law enforcement does is a protection, a covering of people who have the constitutional right to exhibit, assemble, and speak. Those are the people that we need to continue to focus on. But you can't let law and order get eroded by a select group of people. You're going to see that slow down as time, and you already see it nationwide. I would hope it goes back to that if somebody who has a platform uses that in a positive way, I want to believe in the good of people, but I'm also a realist. I'm also not naive. And if somebody's using their influence and their provision to instill more violence and more damage, then shame on them.
But see, but Sheriff, you said the key word is righteous. People think that they're in the righteous position. Those who are doing the violent protests, they believe they are justified in doing so. The celebrities who are paying all this money to defund and, abolish these police departments and to get violent protesters out of the jails, they believe they're in the righteous spot. So people's perception, as you know, is their reality. So how do we change people's perceptions? That's the real big issue, because you walked the walk that day and continuing to do so, and that's in your innate nature. We know a lot of people don't have that integrity. We know a lot of people act, maliciously and not in the best interests, and they say one thing and do another. But when you're looking at behavior that stems so far back, I mean, how do we change people's perceptions of what's right and what's wrong? That's a tough one.
Well, I don't think let's just break this down. Humanity and goodwill towards people is not destroying what other people have built and what they've made in beating people. Those are two different mindsets. I can't say I believe it's right, therefore I'm going to sexually assault somebody. I feel I'm right because of this. I'm going to go kill somebody. I'm talking about people that have a mission, that have a movement. Those are the protesters that have a message to say, time out. We can't have this division anymore. That perception, and I tell you this, I'll start. If you and I have a difference between Michigan State and Michigan, right? And you are a diehard what? If you have to choose one, what would it be?
Well, I went to Michigan, so I'm a Michigan fan. So.
As well. Okay. I'm married to Spartan, so I'm leveled out. But let's
Okay.
just say I'm trying to convince you that I think Michigan State is the better choice. My first question to you is, are you willing to accept other facts, and are you willing to accept that your position could be changed? And if you said absolutely not, then what's the purpose of me trying to change your perception? If you're not even open to it, if you're not even open to hearing about it, learning about it, then at that point, we're going to have to be like, you know what? I love you. We're going to agree to disagree. Let's go get some Wendy's.
But that's at the very base of race relations, and that's the problem in our country. People are so stubborn, you know?
That's why it starts with one person. And that's why, as an example, I talked about DeJuan Robinson yesterday, okay? So he goes to Owasso 2 days ago for a protest where the barber was cutting the hair in Shiawassee County. He goes to a protest. He's the president of Black Lives Matter, okay? He goes into downtown Owasso. He meets with all the people there. He goes up, and there's some folks that have different political hats on, and they have long guns. He walks right up, introduces himself, says, hey, my name is DeJuan Robinson. I live in Flint. They have a great conversation. I mean, he told me about it yesterday. He goes, it was awesome. He goes, they accepted me, and it was great. That's the kind of magic that's happening. That's all over the place. That you're right. You don't see it on the news. But I saw it live yesterday. I saw DeJuan Robinson saying, number one, I would never have gone out to Owasso. Number two, I wouldn't have gone up to that group. And number three, that conversation never would have happened. That's the kind of stuff that is the difference maker. And you know what? Whatever the groups have that are out there, if they don't want to change their perception, then I'm not going to force it. It's not going to be forced to happen. But if we really, really want change, it's going to have to start from the people who can really make it happen, who desire the change. It's kind of like when I coach people of different things. If you're an addict and you don't want to quit, then it doesn't matter what program he puts you in. But if you have down in your guts, every fiber of your life wanting to change, now I've got a student. Now I got somebody who wants to change. And that's why I'm a perpetual optimist. You're not going to get me to be negative. I believe in the good of people. I've lived it my whole life. I've seen it. Thousands of stories of people that were here and have become here. And that's why I love being in the middle of the crosshairs.
I love that. That's amazing. It's the why behind everything, you know? It's the why that motivates us to do better, to be better. Yeah. And it starts within. In order to create that rippling effect, it definitely starts within. And that's a great analogy. Working every day as an addict or whoever, you have to work at it every day. And we cannot let up. Now that the George Floyd movement, you know, we cannot let up. It started, and it's not going to stop until we're all equal, you know, in our beautiful country. And so, you know, there's some other people talking about and really wanting this momentum of defunding. And I know you talked about it, and you said that you think that it's going to not just defund, but really kind of be better, have better enforcement agencies coming. But what happens if the latter part of what you said won't come true? If it's just the defunding and then there's no police? I mean, are we going to go back to the days where mafia controls and people pay off people, you know, to protect them?
Let me use this analogy. It's like when a restaurant gives bad service and terrible food. You don't close all the restaurants. You just make a better restaurant that serves better food with better service. That's what I'm talking about. You can't defund what's a basic Maslow's hierarchy of need: security. I mean, it's food, water, shelter, security. I mean, you have to have that. People need to know that there's a 24-hour source out there that is going to protect and serve. And I get it. Like I said, there's a lot of movement, and I'm not going to change everybody's opinion. It goes back to their perception. But you can't live in a society that we live in without somebody keeping the surface tension between law and order. And that somebody is the police. Somebody is the one who gets their authority from the public. It's just the perception of who those people are has been tainted because of one bad act on top of another, on top of another, on top of another. And if Chris Swanson has anything to do with it, I'm going to change that narrative. That's my new mission.
That's amazing. What do you think are the next steps for Genesee County and your agency moving forward in trying to continue to have better solve rates, have fewer crimes, bridge that gap between law enforcement and community?
Well, we've been here since 1836, and Chris is only the 40th sheriff, and there's going to be 10 more after me, or maybe 100. I don't know. But I know this: while I'm here, We have got a great footprint already done. And that's probably going back to one of the original questions. That probably is another reason why it happens so naturally, because I am part of an agency that we hold our people accountable. We terminate people if we can't train it out or discipline it out. We charge our own people if they break the law. I got a guy next door in another jail who committed a felony on duty. I mean, I don't have a problem with eating our own when they don't represent who we are. That accountability has to come from the highest level. That's why you can go on any of my social media and I've got nothing to hide. This is who Chris is. When the leader sets the tone, when the leader doesn't allow bad acts or requires accountability, then the whole mindset of the police department changes from within, and that spreads from without. Case in point, since COVID hit, our police officers have never, ever relented on their duties. Calls went down. So what did we do? We start answering birthday party calls for kids who are having birthday parties, but their friends and family came over. We've done over 200 holding up signs while the cops are singing happy birthday. Do you think all the cops were happy about that? No, but the families were ecstatic. The kids were going buck wild. And the crusty cops started seeing, hey, this is cool. You know what else we did? We did it for 100-year-old ladies. We did it for people married for 60 years. Those little things, they help both the police and the community. Those are things that are so critical, because my dad used to tell me, you have to do your job all the time. You have to have all your ducks in a row. But you may deal with one person who that's the only time they've ever had any police contact. What's that perception going to be? That's set in my head, because there's a lot of people that this is my job, law and order and disaster and chaos. This is where I thrive. But other people don't have that mindset. Mm-mm. So what's the perception of that? That's why I said the burden falls on us. The burden falls on police leadership to change the narrative, to change the dialogue.
So I have a question. To your point, though, all of what you said, it's fantastic. And I was going to ask you what you felt about the prosecution of the police officers involved in the George Floyd matter.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that then?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't, again, I mean, we charge our own. And just because you wear a uniform and a badge doesn't mean that you are immune from breaking the law. Are you kidding me? And I will say this, caveat. We are held to a different standard, law enforcement. It's called a higher standard, because what I do has a much greater public impact than my neighbor who writes software for a company in the automotive industry. Follow me?
Right.
And so when we break the law, I absolutely see a higher accountability. Now, I don't know Minnesota law. So when they talk about third degree, we don't have third degree in Michigan. I don't know what that is, but I do know that laws through the state have variables. And if they meet that variable, then that's the charge you charge. So when you look at people, and I know I think there was an officer that had just a couple days on the job. There was one that had a couple months on the job. All those things are going to be taken into consideration down the road. But one thing you can't do, you can't let somebody on the back of someone's neck who's prone on the ground with handcuffs, begging for their life, get away with it. That can't happen.
No, with everybody watching now, it's very different from years ago when people didn't have their cameras, in public videotaping everything. And back then it was tolerated. People, so often the perception has been law enforcement can do no wrong. Yeah. They're above the law, and people would throw their arms up and hands up and say, well, they're going to win.
Yeah.
So I believe that's turning around. Don't you believe?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I love being a cop. I'm a good cop. I'm a good man. I'm a good husband. I'm a good dad. I take a lot of pride in everyday decisions, but I'm not perfect. And the day that I think that I have achieved that is the day that I need to check myself.
I have a question coming from another viewer. Is there such a thing as the blue line where police cover their own? Is this the problem in some of these precincts?
Yes and yes. Law enforcement, because of what we see and what we deal with, it's not normal. I saw my first violent death at 18 years old. A guy just four miles to the east. His wife went to go get Burger King. She came back, and he rolled his hospital bed over, took a .32 pistol, shot himself in the head. I'd never, ever forgot that scene. Even to this day, it was the first suicide I've ever seen. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of death families wiped out by carbon monoxide poisoning, crashes, murders and rapes and all. You can't unsee that. Mm-hmm. As a detective, I've been a detective since 2000, getting confessions of people that have committed violent felonies. You can't unhear that. Undercover bits, working on the dope team, human trafficking, our ghost team, which has been all over the state, talking to the most deviant sex offenders ever. I used to do computer crimes back in the early 2000s, seeing child pornography. You need somebody that can understand what's up in here to stay normal. Plus, it's a brotherhood, it's a sisterhood. It's like anything else. It's like U of M. You go to the big house, you need that camaraderie. But camaraderie and the code doesn't cover crime. You can't use that to cover wrong. And to your viewer's point, many times that code gets a little bit too far. And that's where people get frustrated. Now, listen, have I had people that I pulled over that have nothing to do with police work that I've given a break with on a ticket for speeding? Absolutely. I've done the same for police. But there's no different standard. If you abuse that authority, then you have nothing. Just like drunk drivings, I tell my staff, don't call me if any of my family members get pulled over for drunk driving or what you want me to do. They go to jail.
Right.
I don't drink and drive. I've never tasted beer. It's not my thing. So I know that when it comes to drunk driving, that if a police officer these days gets pulled over, they're going to jail. I'm sorry. I didn't put you in that position. The public sees it different. Things are different. Did that happen in the past? Absolutely. Which is part of the reason, to your viewer, it's frustrating to people. We have to change that.
Well, the other thing, Sheriff, is, over time, you were just recounting all of the various crimes that you've witnessed, that you've heard, that you've seen, that almost builds up a resistance in you, a tolerance.
Yes.
And as a police officer,
yes,
maybe 10 years ago, what you thought was heinous, maybe now is kind of like a minor thing. So as law enforcement, and it's really like anything else, how do you train someone? And I believe it takes a special, whether it's psychological treatment, whether it's counseling, whether it's talking to your peers to say, okay, hey, you got to check yourself because this level of aggression toward this perpetrator isn't right. Although the perpetrator, he wasn't or she wasn't doing something right. You as a police officer, you got to check yourself.
This is like a great conversation. I've done a lot of interviews. This is like really fun because we're getting a deep dive here. Number one, I don't have all cop friends. I have normal people that keep me in check. And I am okay enough if I say or do something, they're like, whoa, where'd that come from? So the first thing is to have a balance in your friend circle that can call you out. Because I can get and it's true. My wife has checked me like, whoa, soften that. I'll explain a crime scene as though it's nothing. And the other people are like, I mean, we have to watch our tongue. We have to watch the way we do things. So the key is to have accountability around you. The key is to have people that can be honest with you and you can accept what they say. But the other thing is, there's a lot of things, and I'm talking all public servants. I'm talking military, fire, EMS, and police. Think about it. They see the worst of the worst. I'm talking military that have been deployed, that have been in combat. When you see those kinds of sites, you cannot undo that.
Sure.
And then you expect us to go back. I can't tell you how many times I've seen something horrid. Like it has really messed with my head. On the way home, I call my wife. She's like, hey, how's it going? Hey, good. You need anything? Yeah. Can you stop and get me a Diet Coke from McDonald's? Absolutely. Like, you got to turn that off, but it's hard to do that. Right. And that's why I have such a love for public servants, because I know what they go through. I mean, you're talking about babies and crashes and trauma and suicides. I mean, you need a relief. I just talked to an interviewer yesterday. I said, part of that training may very well, I don't have all the answers. Trust me, I don't have all the answers. This is a work in progress, but maybe a time for someone in law enforcement, if you're full-time, 4 hours a year to go sit down and just vent to somebody who's not a police officer. But we're so afraid of being vulnerable. And do we say what we say, yet it comes back to our police agencies and now we have to defend that? There's a lot of things that happen in law enforcement that we have to fix first. But I definitely say this. You cannot, I've been in a long time. You can't remove the callus that has to be built up for us to stay normal, for us to want to go back to work. I mean, it's a tough field. We don't do it for the fame and fortune. We do it because it's a calling, and it's a tough gig.
Well, and that's kind of analogous to everything that's been going on with COVID-19 and the frontline workers, in the hospitals, right? I mean, they're not making a fortune, taking good, care of all the sick people and the dying people. And, we can't undo what they saw over the last 3 months.
That's right.
And for you, and your agency and all law enforcement across the nation, it is a calling, and it's something that you have to find within yourself to always be on when you're doing it and do the right thing. Yeah. And Sheriff Swanson, I can't thank you enough for being here. What can you leave our viewers with today in terms of trying to maintain a great trajectory moving forward with race relations, not just the blacks and the whites, but just all race relations, all people? I know Black Lives Matter. I know that's, when they say that, sometimes people mistake that for undermining all lives matter, and it's really not. I mean, it's their movement. It's right. It's right. Black Lives Matter. Yeah. But what can you say to our viewers in terms of how law enforcement and how communities in general can just work together to be better?
Okay. Number one, to my police brothers and sisters out there, do not give up on your community. Do not give up by looking at a national movement of violence and say, nothing I did worked. That's not accurate. You're a noble public servant. Number two, don't give up on your police. I need families to continue to support their police, friends to support the police. There are hundreds of thousands of police officers right now that are working the street, giving all they got to do what they were called to do. But the third thing is for everybody, and this goes along to the theme of what we're talking about. I will challenge anybody within the next 24 hours to go up to somebody that looks totally different than you, that you've never known, somebody who doesn't believe like you, somebody that doesn't have the same thoughts or the same views as you do.
Well, somehow we got kicked out. I don't know what happened there, but Sheriff Swanson, I wanted to hear what you were saying, the rest of what you were saying. But anyway, I think what he was trying to get across is he challenges us all to go out and be kind to those that might not agree with you, that might not look like you, that may espouse a different, philosophy of life, but just be kind. Being kind is what really matters, and what will promulgate our nation forward in a positive way. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching us today. We're in such a different time, a time that is here for probably forever, and we need to make change. This has been going on long enough. And I know I started my discussion today talking about Abraham Lincoln from years and years and years ago, and all of those crusaders that came after him. And here we are still today dealing with this same topic. Isn't it time that we change this? Isn't it time that we create a new normal? I mean, gosh, guys, now we're getting out of our homes now. The stay-home orders are getting lifted. Our new normal post-COVID, not just with respect to our health, but let's make it a new normal with respect to how we relate to one another in our race relations globally. Let's make this our new America 2.0. I feel it. I know we're getting there. I know we're on our way. And if you can find it within yourself to put yourself in someone else's shoes just for a minute, I know that kindness is within all of us. And I know we will become better, bigger, and greater as a nation. And only when we come together as a nation will our nation rise. Find it within yourself, be the better person, rise above it, and our nation will rise. Right? We can do this. I know we can. I have faith in our country, and I have faith in each and every one of you. Stay strong, keep your spirits high, and together we will rise.